from discussing and voting on a given application. A recusal does not necessarily mean the member is directly involved with the application or the applicant. Depending upon the circumstances, ethical rules may require a recusal when there is only the slightest appearance of a conflict of interest. If a regular member recuses, a supernumerary will vote in their stead unless both supernumeraries are already voting due to absences. The Planning Commission makes final decisions subject to appeal on subdivisions, planning approvals, and plan unit developments, PUDs. The Planning Commission only makes recommendations on zoning applications, with the City Council making the final decision. Please silence or turn off all cell phones at this time. Commissioners and staff, please remember to turn on your microphones when speaking. Roll call, Ms. Libby Latham. Here. Ms. Jennifer Denson. Here. Mr. Cart Blackwell. Here. Ms. Shirley Sessions.
Here.
Mr. Alan Cameron.
Here.
Mr. Taylor Atchison.
Here.
Mr. Matt Anderson.
Here.
Mr. Nick Omberger.
Here.
Ms. Bess Rich.
Here.
Mr. Don Embry.
Here.
Mr. Jay Stubbs.
Here.
Mr. Bill Goodlow.
Here.
We have a quorum. We'll begin with item number 1, new subdivision applications, 200 St. Emmanuel Street, Fort Condy Restoration Subdivision, Unit 2. This application is recommended for approval. Is the applicant present? Are in agreement with staff recommendations?
Yes, we are.
Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 2, Plantation Commercial Park Subdivision, Unit 2 re-subdivision, southeast corner of Plantation Road, recommended for tentative approval. Applicant present, in agreement with staff recommendations. Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 3. Oh boy. 3600 Spring Hill Avenue, Sherman Oaks on the Hill subdivision, recommended for tentative approval.
Jerry Bird, Bird Surveying Company for the applicant. Briefly, as you can see, proposing a 10-lot subdivision. All of the construction, all required storm drainage will be handled, and of course, approved by city engineer, and retention as shown to be in the northeast corner and be able to flow it back out to Spring Hill Avenue, I believe. We don't have a problem with any of the recommendations except number 2, which calls for the building setback. Subdivision regulations require a 25-foot setback from all street frontages. What we're asking is on the 2 lots, lot 1 and 10, that are at the corner of the proposed street in Spring Hill Avenue, that from Spring Hill Avenue, we have a 12-foot building setback, which 12 feet is allowed by the zoning ordinance. Now, on the, I think each one of you have one of these. To the west of our property is subdivision called Hayfield Place. There is a 6 to 8 foot high fence, board fence, along the orange line. We are dedicating back to the blue lines, dedicating 15 feet on a portion of our frontage. Part of it the city already owns. But so our property line will be 15 feet further back. And that's where we're asking for the 12-foot building setback, is along that line. We're also proposing a wall or fence along that blue line. But like I say, it is allowed by the zoning ordinance, and we're asking to utilize that.
The staff have comment?
Mr. Bird's correct. The zoning ordinance would allow the 12-foot setback along Spring Hill Avenue since the adjoining lots face the other streets. However, the wall or fence would have to go to the Board of Zoning Adjustment, and it's really not part of this application.
Well, yes, if it goes higher than 3 feet.
Correct.
Yeah. The fence that we're proposing to build is the one she's making reference to. Anything higher than 3 feet will have to go to the Board of Zoning Adjustment. So that's another decision to be made. We're not asking for anything on that today. It's just that 12-foot setback.
Any questions by commissioners?
Is the 50-foot setback that's being proposed by staff have to do with safety along Spring Hill Avenue?
Spring Hill Avenue is a planned major street, and it requires 100 feet of right-of-way. The existing right-of-way along this portion of Spring Hill Avenue is variable, and we're just ensuring that adequate right-of-way is dedicated via this plat to bring from center line of Spring Hill to this property in compliance.
So if I may, a question for you, Jerry. So the sum total of the pieces that you're planning to do, you're planning to dedicate a piece of right-of-way to the city, and then you're going to come back with a fence that will be either on private property or on a common area strip
No,
that's there,
it would be built along the dedicated right-of-way line.
but on private
On-
property.
on private
On
property,
private
yeah.
property.
Okay.
And then so the 12-foot setback you're talking about is, once that property has been dedicated, the right-of-way's been dedicated, it's 12 feet from there. So
That's right.
effectively, 12 feet plus whatever the width of the dedication is right now.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And it's only the Spring Hill Avenue. The 25-foot setback on the new street is not a problem.
Do you have a ballpark idea of the width of what that dedication would be?
15 feet,
It's 15 right now, so
Yeah.
effectively 27 feet then.
right.
Any other questions from commissioners? Anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against?
I'm Siri Johnson. I live on Spring Hill Court, which is directly across from the proposed development. I'm not opposed
Could
to
you-
the
excuse
development
me, could-
itself.
Could you
In
give your
fact,
house number for the record? Your proper address for the...
6 Spring Hill Court.
Thank you.
I'm not opposed to the development. In fact, I hope it progresses and provides some attention to something that needs to be addressed along that area, which is traffic. Currently, there's a traffic light at McGregor and one at Tut Hill, and there's not another one west of I-65. So if there's a green light at Tut Hill, people are coming from McGregor underneath I-65, and they're barreling through there at 45, 50, 55, 60 miles an hour, and police are routinely at the bottom of the hill in the Gulfwood area near where Waffle House and McCoy's are located. There's nothing to slow any traffic down anywhere between those two places, and there are numerous neighborhood streets that open up onto Spring Hill Avenue. Talking about the fence coming out of Spring Hill Court, on the northwest lot of our street, there is a fence that is probably 6 feet high, but when it's on top of the raised yard, it's about a 20-foot high blockage. You cannot see pulling out of Spring Hill Court. There are people on the other side of this podium who have family members that pull out of there, and I assure you that no one would want their 15-year-old with a driver's permit pulling out of that street onto Spring Hill Avenue. Today, as I was nosing my car out to see if it was safe to pull out, a woman barreling down the street yelled at me, and I quote, "Back up, bitch." So when we have 10 more houses in Sherman Oaks, and 8 on Mann Drive, and 8 on Spring Hill Court, and 16 on Provident Court, there are going to be 42 houses that are all going to be pulling out within 500 feet. So I pulled out of Provident this morning and drove up Spring Hill Avenue West, and at the middle of where the subdivision entrance would be, the middle of the lot or acreage, was 1/10 of a mile, so approximately 500 feet. We're going to have 42 houses. If you assume that every house has 2 drivers, which my house has 4 drivers, but if you assume that every house has 2 drivers, there are going to be 84 people pulling in and out into that middle lane trying to access Spring Hill Avenue. I would like to see something put there to slow traffic down and allow people to pull out. There's someone else here today. I mean, when Mary Katz and I get home from work at the same time, we are already playing chicken because she's turning left into Mann and I'm turning left into Spring Hill Court, and we're facing each other. And we're playing chicken for who's going to get into the middle lane. So I think that the subdivision, I have no doubt it will be beautiful. It will probably positively affect all property values around it. But I really think that for safety, we need to consider putting in some sort of traffic control there, whether it's a stoplight, a blinking light, or something.
Any questions by commissioners? Or
Do we have
comments?
anyone here from traffic? I don't see anybody to address those questions.
Anything else for me?
No, ma'am, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Anyone else here to speak against?
Mimsy Perrion, that's M-I-M-S-Y, Perrion, and I'm at 512 Hayfield Circle. Actually, I just have a question more than a statement. One of the neighbors on Hayfield is Brian McCarthy, who's an attorney, and I know that he had a letter. I just wanted to make sure that you all had it in your hand. I didn't hear any mention of it, and so I just wanted to be sure of that, because that was just a concern, was the density, and the size of the lots that were going in there. So anyway, that's all I have to say. Okay?
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak against?
I'm Joe Guy on 520 Mann Drive, been there for 20 years. Would like to back up Siri on traffic. I come out every morning. It's tough. Like to bring to your attention, my lifetime, 5 people have died. Alex Carroll, Stroker, and 3 more. So it's dangerous. Sometimes you can't get out because there's too much traffic, sometimes they're flying. Why do we have 8 people in our neighborhood and they're going to have 10 with a detention pond? What is that? I mean, stockfish? I mean, I don't know. Gotcha. So it's going to be near my house. So that's going to put 10 people in a smaller area, which is going to hurt the traffic. The traffic is an issue. Please consider it. Again, why 8 for our neighborhood and 10 for them? They're on an 80 by 10, 80 by 100 lots. Seems awful small. Thank you.
Excuse me, can I ask a question, sir? Real fast. What is the average size lot in your subdivision that abuts this, would you say?
Excuse me? 100 by 100.
100. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Question for staff. Is anyone from traffic going to be at the meeting today, or?
I'm here either way. They just submitted the comments that are on the report regarding the denial of access, direct access to Spring Hill Avenue for lots 1 and 10. We had
That was
no-
their only comment.
That is
So
correct.
they know about the problem.
Anyone else here to speak against? I can take one more.
Hi, I'm Sarah McDavid. I live at 8 Spring Hill Court, right on the corner of Spring Hill Avenue and Spring Hill Court. My window looks out on to Spring Hill. I, too, am very concerned about the traffic. I have 3 small children, an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 15-month-old, and we pull out onto Spring Hill often. Mostly from our street, the problem seems to be the wall and the fence. We really have no view of Spring Hill Avenue, and I think that adding the subdivision would further complicate things. Like Siri was saying, you know, people coming from different directions, different streets, all into the turning lane at the same time. I already fear for my kids when we pull out onto that street. All I can think about is somebody's gonna cream me, like, because it's almost happened on more than one occasion. In fact, a couple months ago, there was an actual accident, 2 cars behind me, because everybody came to a screeching halt. They were going, Siri said maybe 45, 55, 60 miles per hour, but I'd say that's conservative. I watch from my kitchen window and my house trembles, and I can see how fast they're flying down the road, and it's really out of hand, and I'm afraid that the subdivision would create more problems. I'm excited. I think it'd be a great, addition to the area, but the traffic's a problem. And also something the applicant may want to take into consideration is property value. When we were buying my house right there on the corner, that was a huge, huge factor when we were considering it. We fought over it and talked about it, and we still bought, obviously, and we're happy where we are, but I think that it could affect property value. Our house sat on the market for quite some time, and I really think it has a lot to do with the safety through there, with the traffic, and I just hope that y'all will consider this, and the Planning Commission and traffic folks over here, if y'all approve the application for this subdivision. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Question for Mary Beth, real quick. There's a traffic signal there at Tut Hill and Spring Hill, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other plans for any kind of future traffic signals on that little strip going down to the interstate?
No, sir, not at this time. It would definitely not be at this location, as close as it is to Tut Hill,
Right.
if there was one.
What is the speed limit through there? Is it 45?
35 is
35.
my understanding, and it is very difficult to go 35 down that hill. I would totally agree with that.
Right.
There was also, are you done?
Yeah, I bet.
There was representation that there's been deaths in that vicinity, and it was represented that there have been 5. I don't know over what span. Do you have any knowledge of that area and the traffic safety?
No, ma'am, offhand I do not. I'd have to look and see what we can
that's
find in the information.
Pretty important.
Mr. Chairman, so what is the likelihood that we could put a blinking light in the area? I think that's had some positive effects on Cottage Hill and a couple other places where we've put them.
On Cottage Hill, I think the most recent place we've had a light installed, Natchez Trace.
Yeah, the
something
Natchez
like that.
Trace subdivision.
Part of the issue there was the curve of the road.
Yeah, the visibility.
Not so much it was the curve and the speed combined. There's not really a curve here. I mean, there's a vertical curve, yes, but not the horizontal curve. That was the bigger issue on Cottage Hill.
It still might be worth looking into.
It's possible, but then you could say the same thing for every one of those intersections going down the hill. So you have to. We can't put them everywhere because then they'll lose its effectiveness.
Oh, understood.
I think what we're seeing is there's this concentrated area where there's egress and ingress, whereas down, going down the hill is a problem because the people really do speed up a lot there because they're past the stoplight, but for going down. But there is not this constant concentration of people meeting in the center to have to make their left, depending on what direction they're coming from. So I think that's what I'm hearing, more of the concentration. So a blinking light or even something that gets people's attention for, because we hear that a lot out west too.
Well, then one of the other things that Ms. Bess, you're familiar with, that we've looked at on these 5-lane roadways, is if it is a problem in the 5-lane section in that middle, is putting in those, I hate to say sporadic islands, but defining where people can get into and out of. Because it could be very possible people are getting into that center lane to go left up at Tut Hill.
Yes.
So defining where that can start to happen is an option that can be considered.
Well, it appears to me the problem is, it's all up and down that strip like we were talking about. And enforcement sounds to be like that would be the only solution to making that strip of road safer. You can't put enough traffic lights or caution lights, but enforcement would be a way to mitigate that.
It's a start, but enforcement can't happen all the time. They have commitments in other parts of the city too, so it's a start.
Yeah.
But it would have to be done on a kind of routine but sporadic basis.
It needs to earn the reputation of being a
speed trap.
A speed trap, right.
Yeah.
Right.
But the cement, when the city put in that cement between the apartment complex and Carriage Hills, because people were using that middle lane as a travel lane, then people who were there to turn left or right to pay attention to each other didn't expect that coming. And so that has been very helpful there.
Yeah, there were some growing pains at first. We had to replace a tree and some signs because some folks weren't used to it. But we have not had that problem since the first 3 months after those islands were put in.
Yeah, it's been very successful, I think, from my phone not ringing.
Bert?
Yes. I'll agree. Spring Hill Court has a visibility problem. I know that fence and that elevated lot that's on the west side, and if I remember correctly, there's a rock wall probably about this high that is setting at the back of the curb of Spring Hill Avenue, pretty vertical. It slopes back slightly, and then the fence goes up. There's no place that the front end of a car can pull out enough to see. Fortunately, our side of the road is going to be a little bit better. We'll have the 12-foot setback to where our fence is, plus out to the curb line, about another 12. We will be able to see toward the interstate easily, to see cars coming up the hill. And we'll also be able to see a whole lot better, even with the neighbor's fence being further out, in that we will have the opportunity to look across 2 lanes of pavement and see cars that are leaving Tut Hill going down the hill. Our side will be safer than the other side.
Can you line up with Spring Hill Court so that
Not exactly.
your property is in the vicinity of that?
Yeah, it's in
Do
the
you think
vicinity,
that
but our
would-
streets do not line up, no.
I know you're going right down the center, but you're moving over, and if anything, that's the conflict I think we're hearing about. It's not for visibility on your side, but if you have people coming in, and you have people that want to go, I guess that's west on Spring Hill, and someone's coming east and wants to turn in, could their entrance line up at least to create a proper intersection there? I mean, it would shift, I know.
Of course, there's problems up and down Government Street, same way on turn lane.
Yeah,
when
but
people
we're
are
hearing
trying
the
to get-
visibility problem, and we're hearing these quick cuts where people can't line up appropriately, whereas this might be an opportunity to make sure that doesn't happen. It won't fix the visibility problem, but it will at least line them up that when they look across the street, they know if someone's coming out. Then if you do some cement things and you prevent people from driving in that middle lane as though it's a passenger lane, you're gonna help, and it would become a safer intersection there.
Meaning that people in Spring Hill Court, if you did this cement thing, would have an option only of turning
No, they can go
right?
in all directions, you just want to prevent someone from thinking in the future that they can take it all the way up to Tut Hill. Because people will ride those middle lanes like it's their own express lane. And it's people who are turning are paying really good attention. They just don't expect someone to come flying either behind them. And if there's no barriers, it really did help in Carriage Hills across from the Zaxby, because once that traffic started picking up, and it was discovered where those accidents were coming from. It was people riding that middle lane. It was not people making turns. So,
Of course,
I don't know, the
car
property's
making a
there.
turn in the middle can just sit still and let that one that's trying to drive from there all the way up the hill to Tut Hill,
No,
wait and
if
get
they're
back in line and go
waiting in
around.
the intersection, thinking that they're just waiting for the next two lanes in the direction they want to go in, they don't expect that, they did not expect somebody to come flying up that middle lane.
No.
Because, like I said, they use
Yeah.
it as an express lane, especially when they want to make a left-hand turn at a light. That's got the protective left for them at the top of it.
So I have a question. These concrete improvements to the middle lane, whose expense would that be? Is it-
We did it as a CIP program, use CIP money.
So it'd be the city, not the developer?
Yeah, we could have gotten the developer, but that wasn't a request, because they did create more people coming in that center lane and making turns. But the problem was always the person who rode that middle lane, especially during peak traffic times.
Yeah. Well, the other
It's a
thing,
bad habit.
the other thing to me about this is this property has two ways to go. Either this can be a big, giant, single-family home, or it's going to be what they're proposing. And quite frankly, and this is just a comment, it seems to me that the market will tell you whether there are going to be 8 lots, 8 houses built in there or not. And if I was going to build $1 million house in there, I'd certainly look at the traffic and consider all that. So
I think the property's sat vacant for quite a while. I guess no one's come along to build that $1 million house or $5 million house on that piece of property.
It's obvious there's a traffic problem in this area of the city. What's traffic's opinion of how these new 8 potential 10 residences will affect the traffic problem on Spring Hill Avenue?
On the grand scheme of things, if you're only asking me to add 8, it's a drop in the bucket compared, and we can't keep up with the larger lots that are being subdivided and duplicated once or twice over. It's happening at a rate and on such a small scale that there's not anything we can request the developers to do of those individual sized lots, just because it's just hard to catch.
Right. Thank you.
Jerry, can you describe, I mean, these are tiny lots, so I mean, what size houses are going to be built on these lots? Are they townhomes or?
No, be probably in excess of 2,000 square feet, value 500,000 and up,
like a
package, house and lot.
Single-car garage or double-car garage, or? I just don't see how you're going to get a lot of
Double.
double, okay.
Is there any value in lining up this one so it's not an off-centered one with creating some of the trauma out there?
When streets can align, that's always better than they're skewed. When they're skewed to this degree, it's better than them being skewed to the opposite direction. So if you had to rank them 1, 2, or 3, aligned is best, this would be second, and the opposite alignment, if Spring Hill Court was to the west and this new street was to the east, that
So
would be.
further up towards Hayfield?
If this street, if the new proposed street was closer to Man, and Spring Hill was
Right,
closer to Tut Hill,
yeah.
that would be the least desirable. That's where you start to have the left turners trying to
Yes.
share the same space.
Right, that's what I'm thinking, and when you look at Spring Hill Court, it does put it closer to Man, to line it up. To make it, maybe not a proper intersection, but at least they would see each other, and you could, and you're saying the developer wouldn't be responsible for cementing and making that just so that it was not a constant opening there?
If the developer chose to do that as part of a right-of-way permit for the driveway, we would not frown upon it. It is not something that our department came up with and is requiring because of the size of the development not requiring a study. That's usually what triggers our improvements in the right-of-way, is when there's a traffic impact study that's completed as part of the project.
But if we move our street over to line up at Spring Hill Court, then we're getting closer to Man. And they're talking about a problem there too. So you're increasing their problem.
And the other thing you wouldn't want
No,
to
you'd
look
help
at.
them because you would get people, if you did the cement thingies and island them or whatever, you would help Man because people would not come flying down or up that middle lane because they wouldn't have enough time to get into it. So I think you would make that a safer intersection to come across both directions too. I think it would help both of those and might help Provident, not as much, but that one for sure. I mean, I'm just looking, drawing circles on a map, but
My question for traffic, it relates to the concrete barrier. Since you're trying to stop people from cutting into that travel lane to get to Tut Hill, would you not put the barrier closer to Tut Hill? I mean, how much stack up do you need?
It would be closer to Tut Hill. It would definitely be west of both of these streets.
Perfect.
We'd have to look at how long the turn lane really needs to be for Tut Hill as far as the storage length, and go from there.
So it would not affect the ability of either of these streets to turn right or left?
No, ma'am,
on
not at
Spring
all.
Avenue?
Thank you. Any more questions by commissioners? Thank you, sir. New plan unit developments, application number 4, Legacy Village LLC, 9100 DeRue Drive. Ms. Latham is recused, recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 5, Dawson Apartments, 94 East Drive. It's recommended for holdover. Is the applicant present?
Jay Broughton, Anchor Engineering, 50 North Florida Street. And I want some clarification. I'm in agreement with y'all's comments. I'd just like some clarification on items 1 and 3 pertaining to the density requirements and the side setbacks, or the setback. If y'all could just shed some light on the intent of that.
that would be a good staff question.
Okay.
Confidence. In regards to item number 1, the density requirements, Staff calculated the area of the property at roughly 45,000 square feet, give or take a couple of hundred. The maximum number of units that are allowed on a property of that size in an R3 district is 26. Now, we had issues with inconsistencies between the narrative submitted, which stated that there are 14 units proposed. However, on the site plan, it illustrates 14 units in a 3-story building, which is 42 units. Also, in the parking table that was submitted, the parking was calculated based on there being 42 units.
Right.
That all exceeds the density allowed in R3 and thus is prohibited. There are too many units proposed for this size property.
Units being bedrooms, is that?
No, units being independent dwelling units as defined on your plan, an apartment. It
Right.
looked like they are one-bedroom units, but they're each individual apartments.
Okay. I'll need to clarify with the architect and the owner on that. In regards to the setbacks, I would,
Okay. Yeah, but they've got that. I think your setbacks are actually adequate. Yeah, those appear to be adequate because you're 25 feet from the front. R3, you're okay with the 8-foot setback on the side and the rear.
okay.
And your 2 side yards equal 20 because of the parking on the other side.
Okay. And I'm in agreement with adding the fence on the west property line. We found out that there was a pre-development meeting held back in 2017, which caused the inconsistencies between the plan and the narrative, but we can update all of that. I understand that the filing deadline for the September 5th meeting has passed. Would there be any objection to us getting this updated and turned back in and still making the September 5th meeting date?
That's a staff question.
The September 5th meeting is a pretty heavy agenda. You would need to have these revisions back to staff by noon Monday.
Okay. And I'd be willing to do that.
Okay. And the biggest issue would be the reduction in the number of units to comply with the density requirements.
Sure.
Question, that's okay.
Sure.
What makes this innovative, because it's a PUD?
I think just the architectural style of it will make it appealing. It's close to University of South Alabama, so I think it's fulfilling a need there. I mean, in terms of the innovation, we're utilizing as much green as we can in the sidewalks and around the parking area. Keeping the existing trees that are there. I know there's a couple of big trees that we're gonna save.
'Cause I thought the
Ms.
landscape plan.
Ms. Rich, if I may, the stipulation on the property when it was rezoned required a PUD. This is all under one roof. This is all one building.
What's the what are those other units across the way?
That is a second, since we were going through the PUD process, 2 buildings.
You did separate it?
Yes, ma'am.
Because it appeared in the drawings that it was all under one roof with the stairwells running through here.
Those are intended to be 2 separate buildings.
Okay.
So it makes the PUD requirement that got it rezoned in 81 initially?
It required the PUD regardless of whether if it was one building or 20. That
The review of the
condition.
planning commission
Yes,
To get
ma'am.
it to be reviewed.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we know what the building materials will be?
No, ma'am, I'm not sure of that yet.
Because a lot of times on a PUD, that's able to be reviewed is the type of building materials. So
Sure.
if that's known, that would be helpful, since it required a PUD.
Okay.
Those are some of the requirements. And the traffic, which is not supposed to have a negative effect on surrounding property. So if you're going to have less units, would you propose less parking spaces?
But by nature of the usage, yes, ma'am, we would reduce the amount to obviously meet the requirements.
And can I get straight on the units? That's separate apartments, not by the bedroom, although we do the parking ratio based on the number of bedrooms.
That is
But They
correct.
seem to rent by the bedroom in this area. Okay.
So just to go back to that, if there were 14 three-bedroom units, it would still meet the allowed usage of this zoning. Is that correct?
If you had 14 apartments with 3 bedrooms each, yes, that
Okay.
would comply with density. You would still have to comply with parking based on the number of bedrooms.
Understood. Yes, ma'am. And this site plan shown here does meet the parking
Parking.
requirements per the number of bedrooms.
Correct.
Okay.
So will it just be a matter of semantics, so to speak, to still get something that looks like this but isn't considered different units? So I'm not following this, because you're saying if you come back and just show that this whole apartment has 4 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms, so it's still gonna have the number of bedrooms. So the density as far as people actually living under the roof will not change, even though the zoning requirements say there's something to be said about density.
Correct. In general, yes, ma'am. The density is based on individual housekeeping units. You know, we have 3-bedroom apartments all over Mobile. It is simply in this area that has the parking overlay that the parking is based on the number of bedrooms as opposed to the number of apartment units.
So it's not gonna go down to 26 bedroom unit, or bedrooms.
That is going to be up to what the applicant submits, and we'll do our analysis from there.
The- okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
This item's recommended for holdover, which will probably be granted. At such time, you'll get to speak for or against it as well. However, you do have the right to speak for or against it now, if you so choose.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Lee. I reside at 300 Trent Mill Court, Ridgefield. I'm the past president of the Homeowners Association. I have a message that I would like to deliver first from the lady that resides directly across from this proposed development. Her name is Miss Diane Howard. She regrets that she couldn't be here today. She's right now having an operation in New Orleans. I went up to see her 2 days ago to see if she would be attending, and the first thing she expressed was shock that she didn't know what was going on at all. I don't know what the requirements are for notification, but she was not notified. The one thing that she would like to straighten out and get on the record, and all I can do is hold up this example right here. It has her property. She lives at 99 East Drive. It shows it as a church. This is wrong. It is a residence. She lives there. It's a single-family residence. She's lived there for a while. Her first comment when she saw the proposal and looked at it was, gosh, I knew the guy that lived there many years ago, or didn't live there, owned the property, and he approached the city of Mobile and wanted to build a set of duplexes. He was turned down by the city of Mobile, said it was too much. Okay, so that's Miss Diane's message right now. I'll go with my message. Been down here before to speak about East Drive. Maybe we've been spoiled in the past by some of the healthy meetings we've had with developers and proposed developers. We've all sat at the same table and had discussions. They got to know who we are as far as a neighborhood and neighbors, and we got to know what they proposed. This has not, unfortunately, been the case here at all. got to looking at the proposal and went to the map of the apartment, trying to get a sort of idea of what's going on. And as you can see from the map, it's 1.03 acres. And I hate to say this, they're cramming all this on 1.03 acres. And I said this before down here, I think it applies again today. This is too much for too little. I looked and said, okay, well, what kind of amenities? What are they going to throw out there? Swimming pool, hot tub, picnic area, volleyball court? I don't see any of that. The other thing that I don't see, and I kind of read through it, is I don't see where there's a sidewalk. And we here, again, have asked y'all, please make sure that the sidewalks are there. We need the sidewalks. It's a very walkable neighborhood. It's across the street from the university. We have people that do come across, that live across, that walk. So I don't know if I've missed something, but that would be something that we would specifically request. Let's not be foolish and pretend that this is not R3. We've known this is R3. I think the document stated since 1981 it was R3. We kind of always sort of thought maybe we would see a couple of duplexes built in here, 2, 3, maybe 4, but never in our wildest dream did we see, a 3-story building coming in like this, just everything packed in with another building out in front. I was listening to the conversation about beds and units and all that and going through this. You look at the parking places and do the ratio. I'm still confused. Somebody maybe after this meeting can help straighten me out, but it seems like a lot. One thing Miss Diane Howard did say is, yes, the intersection of East Drive and Old Shell Road is a traffic-controlled intersection. There are times during the day, morning and afternoon, when the traffic will back up beyond her house. The question we have asked here before is, when is enough for East Drive? We were hoping to sit with somebody with the city and develop if you want to say, a mini master plan for East Drive. It's long overdue. There's still quite a few properties that need to be developed. I would hate to be the last one to develop and come down here and say, well, we've maxed it all out. You can't have anything, build a house there or something like that, because at some point, we're going to hit the overflow, and it's coming soon. Anyway, we appreciate that it's put off. We hopefully will get to meet with the developer and find out what he's got on his mind. Thank you.
I do agree with the gentleman's comment about the sidewalks. We actually, it's difficult to see, but in that plan, we are proposing sidewalks along East Drive just to continue the continuity with the surrounding area. And I agree, there's a lot that can be done with getting involved on the front end of it. But in terms of the sidewalk, we are proposing it in front of the property.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I do have one now that, you have a proposed signage. Do you show where you're gonna, trash will be placed and what kind
Yes,
of
ma'am, and the
service? Well, it's obviously private, but is it gonna be that they'll put their garbage cans where?
It's a dumpster in the back left, in the northwest corner.
And they have to go all the way, okay. All right. And that's tied to the sanitary sewage?
Yes, ma'am, it will be.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank y'all.
Item number 6. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, is there anyone else who would like to speak against this? Thank you. Item number 6, 600 West I-65 Service Road South. Recommended for tentative approval, the applicant present. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Oh. Okay. Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Yes, sir. Okay, thank you. Applicant is present and in agreement with staff recommendations. Is there anyone else here to speak for or against this item? Thank you. That concludes our public session. We'll now enter into deliberation. Item number 1, 200 St. Emmanuel, Fort Condy Restoration subdivision application recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
Second?
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 2, Plantation Commercial Park Subdivision, Unit 2, re-subdivision of lots 10 and 12, recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 3, Sherman Oaks on the Hill subdivision, recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
Well, I'd like to get staff's opinion on the requested change from 25 feet to 12 feet on item number 2.
That request is commensurate with the zoning ordinance requirements. It would still allow for the adequate dedication to provide for the planned major street, and then you would still have the 12 feet past that dedication. It'll put their setback actually further back from the existing lots there at the end of Hayfield Place.
So it would simply change 25 feet to 12 feet in the item 2. to meet
Along
that need.
Spring Hill Avenue.
Along Spring Hill Avenue, right. I don't think there is a perfect solution. I know there was a request made to reduce the number of lots from, I guess, 10 down to 8 or 6, whatever it was. No,
Yeah, reduced on the letter.
right. I mean, I think if we can do something while we're, making this development to improve the traffic in the area, we need, try to find a way to do that. I'm just not sure how much of an impact we can make. If we put the concrete islands in the center median, well, first off, is that something that we as a planning commission can require the applicant to do? Nobody wants to take that away.
We've required, in a couple situations, shopping center owners, developers to pay for a traffic light on city property, so I think you could make that requirement.
Okay.
Nothing you do is going to improve the situation. I mean, you said, now that we've got it, we can see what we can do to improve it. There's nothing you can do. I live off Tut Hill. I travel this 2 or 3 times a day. Nothing you can do is going to improve the situation. You just got to make sure this has as little negative impact as possible.
Make it worse. Right.
Personally, I don't think we're qualified to try to improve traffic.
I'd like to hear from traffic on if there is anything that would be more helpful, especially after hearing what we've heard about accidents and deaths and just the whole conflicts in that section.
Yeah, I can't speak specific to the corridor, but just about 5-lane roads in general with intersecting streets that happen this close together and off-aligned. I mean, I don't like 5-lane sections. I wish the county would stop building them, but I don't have control over that. But then again, access management is a word you hate to hear either. Now, the island that you're talking about is not access management, in my opinion. That's just designating right-of-way. I think it is a safe alternative. Would we look at doing it down the hill at other places? I don't think so. Not going further down the hill. It's a bigger issue up towards the intersections where you've got the traffic signal, where you have the queue, where you have the people that are obeying the light and waiting till they get closer to get into the left turn lane. That's what the incidents that we saw looking at the intersection on Cottage Hill, it was the people that were speeding down the center turn lane and then the people that were in the left lane merging into the center turn lane where they were supposed to. and having that conflict. That's where the conflict, in that type of intersection, that type of scenario, it was happening. 5-lane sections aren't necessarily designed to take, what is it? When you have a 5-lane section, you're supposed to make left-hand turns all at one time. You're supposed to leave your side street and go all the way in the, if you're making a left turn, you're supposed to continue into those lanes. The reality is that's not how it happens. So we have to allow the areas in that 5-lane section, in that middle, for people to make the 2-stage lefts. And adding the concrete island is something that can be done to help improve the safety, yes, in my opinion.
Well, again, I think we're very limited with what we can do. I mean, there is no perfect solution, like Mr. Anderson said, but can we minimize what impact we're having with this new development? That's the question, and I don't really know that we have an answer to that, but you know, I think we could make an effort to try. I mean, it seems to me like the concrete island would be a better, it's either that or, like Ms. Rich was talking, realign how the road comes in and line it up so it's directly across from the other road to make it a straight intersection, but that would be, I don't know if that would really accomplish much either, so.
Chairman, if I may, the challenge here is there's generally one extreme or the other. And the extreme that there is now, where it's a 5-lane section, is you have the competing left-hand turn lanes. When we've tried to do projects in the city where we put raised medians throughout the whole entire length of a corridor, Hillcrest Road is one that comes to mind. You know, the neighbors that were going to lose left turns out were the most vocal groups. And so that's what the opposite of extreme of a 5-lane section would be here. A raised median down the entire length of the hill, or a very significant portion of it, so that none of the side streets could have left turns out. That means Mann Drive couldn't make a left out. That means Spring Hill Court couldn't make a left out. And so there's a series of compromises. And I think somebody said earlier, there is no perfect scenario. You know, we pursued a very substantial project on Hillcrest Avenue, and there was a neighborhood of 16 folks that were going to have to drive an extra couple hundred feet to make a U-turn because they weren't going to be able to make a left turn that they were accustomed to, and they were very, very upset with the city in trying to pursue that. So it's very much a series of compromises. I think in most instances, and I drive this corridor on a daily basis 2 or 3 times a day myself, most of the time it's a matter of enforcement. I mean, I think if we can work with the Public Safety Department and have more routine enforcement, issue some tickets, I mean, that's what typically gets most people's attention, because the alternative is going to be a very expensive project for a raised median that's going to make a lot of people unhappy.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I would just like to say that it would seem a little bit unusual to me, considering this is a relatively minor development, and as Mary Beth mentioned earlier, the impact of the number of cars that's going to be coming from this development in the grand scheme of things is relatively small. She's already dedicated that we're going to look into the situation with regard to some caution lights. Having a developer to make improvements in the right-of-way on a small development like this seems a little bit burdensome for the developer. It's not a business-friendly attitude, in my opinion. If we're going to be requiring things like that in lieu of doing appropriate traffic counts and studies and real access management, which hasn't gone over well in the past, you know, I think that's just a slapshot way of looking at it. We've got to be a little bit more comprehensive and thoughtful when we're looking at these major corridors. That's just not the appropriate way to do it.
Thank you. Margaret did remind me after I made the statement about making shopping center developers do traffic lights, that it has always been a result of a traffic impact study because of the size of the development. Here, we don't have any study. Like Mr. Cameron said, are we qualified, or y'all qualified, are we qualified to make those decisions without a professional study?
Thank you, sir.
Move to approve based on staff recommendations, changing item number 2 to 12-foot minimum setback along Spring Hill Avenue and leaving all other streets at the 25-foot setback line.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Yes. Would this be something where this developer could pay for a traffic study to see what methods, even if it comes out that it's a blinking light, would pay for, or is that just done all in-house and just on the list of other areas to study? Because, again, you, as a planning commissioner, I'm hearing from residents who live there and know this section, and they're basically telling us it's a problem. And it's true, it's not a shopping center. It's single family, and they all said they welcome it, but what do we need to do to make sure that their investment is protected, that their lives are protected first and foremost? Because it seems as though pretty soon people won't want to live there, and so it doesn't matter what we're putting in. It just becomes an area that's not considered good. And so why would we keep doing this over and over again if there is something that could be done? We don't know what it is, we're not qualified, but could this developer be asked to do that?
Mary Beth, what's the minimum standard we've had in the past as far as our policy for TIS?
For single-family homes, it's 100 units.
150 units?
100.
Yeah. The only time I recall, I'm not sure I remember a traffic impact study for a residential subdivision. I'm sure we've had them, but I just remember commercial developments on busy streets. My personal opinion, this isn't a legal opinion, I guess, but on behalf of the city, if you make this size development on Spring Hill Avenue, do a TIS, then everybody on Airport Boulevard that does any kind of development, you're going to require. And those cost $10,000. And you have to look at the size of the development as to the benefit you're going to get out of a TIS.
But when do you get to the tipping point of saying something doesn't qualify, but you know that there's an area that could benefit if there were certain things put in place at the same time it's being developed?
This be something
And I understand, I'm not arguing with you, Ms. Rich. It's just again, for a 10-lot subdivision on Spring Hill Avenue, if you required of that, you're going to have to require it on Highway 90, Airport Boulevard, every development, you're going to be having the same issue. And the threshold has got to be more than, as far as doing a traffic or requiring a traffic impact study, it's got to be more than a 10-unit
Can you
subdivision.
say deaths in an area? And I don't know if that's factual or what time span that was. That's alarming to me.
I would think that a traffic study for a development this size would be incumbent if it's a Spring Hill Avenue issue for all the neighborhoods. I would think that the city council person for that area, as well as the city council and the city departments, would take up a traffic study to see how they could mitigate it for all the residents along Spring Hill and not put the burden upon a 10-unit development, which, that's a big drop in the bucket for them to pay for a study for the entire street. And that's just the chair's opinion on that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I agree.
I call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes with one vote against. Item number 4, Legacy Village, 9 and 100 LaRue Drive. Ms. Latham recused. It's recommended for tentative approval.
Move to approve based on staff recommendations with findings of facts of A, B, C, and E. Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 4, East Drive, recommended for holdover until September,
19th.
is it 19th or?
Staff recommended 19th.
They said the 5th.
He requested the 5th, but then I think we had sort of come to the conclusion that 19th would be better, and also to allow the opportunity for the developer to have a community meeting, which I understand that has not happened.
No.
Recommended for holdover until September 19th.
Second?
Any further I'm making the motion. Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor for holdover? Against? Items held over till September 19th meeting. Item number 6, 600 West I-65 Service Road. Recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendations as findings of facts C and D.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Is there any other business? Meeting adjourned.
Thank you very much.
You had your ABCs lined
I
up.
had them lined up.
They can